so pretty, 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 pretty. Baby girl, you are so pretty, pretty.
Hey y'all, it's Shem, and welcome to Spoken, a podcast for the poets. And I'll be sharing an original work today by yours truly, performed by Jay, who will also be sharing an original work. The first poem that will be shared today is called Young, Gifted, and Black.
What's up, y'all? So here we go. To be young, gifted, and black is to always have my intellect under attack, to have my ability to read whipped into my ancestors' backs, my ability to write that came only after a long, sorrowful fight, how I'd stay up all night lost in the powers that they could not will themselves but have granted me, book after book, essay after essay. What a robbery to know only a word when it is heard and not when it is written and preserved. It is to doubt your brain and always be privy to shame. It is to carry the weights of the knowledge that my ancestors were never graced with, but crave the wisdom they could not leave behind. To be young, gifted, and black is to have my creativity scrutinized, to fall victim to noisy eyes when one is to dance and not write or to sing and not read. It is to be afraid to choose a life full of music when so many were forced into silence, never knowing of just how many singers, dancers, writers, and painters were lost to the white man's violence. It is to seize every opportunity like it may be your last because there never was a plan, never a plan A, just a plan black. That every move is on a chessboard, choosing what parts of you must be sacrificed for the greater good. But tell me, if only the king is left standing, then what was the point of the war? Why fight when there is no one left to fight for? To be young, gifted, and black is to be born into a predetermined story, to be assigned the role of underdog at birth, and check a box that is equivalent of your life's worth, to be locked into a race that was never ever designed for you to get second place. To be young, gifted, and black is to win anyway. It is to have all the creativity your ancestors never knew they lacked, robbed before realization. To have the time and freedom to explore the arts that were lost on labor and grief. It is to write the stories that wanted to live but were hung from poplar trees. It is to take the seeds that strange fruit left behind and plant them in your garden so that they can feed our starving souls. It is to take the fragments of life before you and glue them back together, to make new puzzle pieces when the image cannot yet be complete. Bits lost in the Atlantic and in auction blocks, to be a shadow in your ancestors' light and allow them to do what they could never achieve in life and just shine brightly and unapologetically. To be young, gifted, and black is to be born with a smooth back and unsnapped neck, for kinky hairs to reach to the sky and skin to absorb the sun, for braids to just be braid and not a roadmap. It is to live under constant siege and never surrender. I am no avenger, but instead, my ancestors' greatest defender.
Okay. Snaps to myself and to you for performing that so well.
Thank you.
And what is your first impression after performing the words?
That is a chilling poem, and just I think, I love poetic devices such as, personification and metaphor, and just the ode to, what I heard from, gosh, what's her name? Nina Simone from Strange Fruit. Like that last part of it. I'm big on taking songs and the imagery. I loved that. I feel like it was really well written, and the message was so potent about what this idea of, to be young, gifted, and black looks like versus what people believe it is. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Definitely made a play on the words from Nina Simone with the strange fruits. So it's always nice when a fellow poet can catch the very small but necessary connections within a poem to real life.
Definitely.
You also have poetry works that are written talking about your experience as a black male in America or anything you've been through.
I think it's, you know, it's, to be frankly honest, it's something that I feel like as a poet, you know, I got into poetry just to kind of have a way to express myself. It wasn't even about being a poet. It was just, let me just write something down. And so, you know, that I've gotten into that, and I do have a few poems like that. I try to do it in a way that reflects what I see from other black men in society, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Poetry for me also was not something I came to looking for poetry, but more of a written form of expression that happened to match poetry. I'd never confined myself to any of the poetry rules as far as grammar and whatnot. I mean, it's whatever you want it to be, but there are, recommendations. You could write a sonnet, you could write a certain type of poem. I've never confined myself to those rules in the sense of having creative freedom, but I do know that you've written a few poems within those structures that still came out pretty well.
Thank you.
And the poem that you'll be sharing with us today that's written by you would be named what?
His story.
His story. Okay.
Yeah. And this one was, gosh, I wrote it for an event, and it took a lot of deep thinking because there was so much going on at the time, and I kind of did my best to just put it all in writing. So here we go. This is his story. To know your history is to be in line with those who have come before. The things they did, the places they went, and the things they felt. But outside of Sunday school and Martin Luther King luncheons, let's be real, how often did you actually learn about history? And I mean, honestly, I rock with Dr. Martin Luther King, but before he had a dream, they didn't tell us the bigger things. Did you know that before slavery, we came from kings and queens with melanin that gleamed just as bright as the sun's beams? We had our own communities where we learned how to be, how to cook, how to read, how to cry, how to sing. And though eventually my ancestors was taken from their home, to connect the dots where vision clots is why I write this poem. That's why I write this poem. But see, this ain't a poem. It's a hymn because I'm him. This is Psalm 139 straight out the Old Testament. It's relevant. I want to tell the children that knowledge of self is divine like a holy sacrament. And though my train of thought is adamant that that ain't my story. Nah, this is his story. A concept we must share and push forward, you see, because when you ban our his story, you ban our humanity. For example, the powers that be love to ask the young boys and girls to slow down, but leave out the part that a black man by the name of Benjamin Banneker invented the stoplight. They ask us to participate in blood drives and omit the part that a black man by the name of Charles Drew invented the blood transfusion, a valuable procedure that helps save millions of lives worldwide. They ask us to create our own reparations and resources to defend ourselves, but they leave out the fact that this is really what Malcolm X stood for, a game changer, instead of being made out to be violent and militant. If we suppress the names of his story and put rhymes to a drum and a beat like Sean Corey, you see, they don't want us to know his story. The plight of young, educated black men long endured, all due to the lack of knowledge. You are the generational cure. So learn from this story, and then you too can become his story. Thank you.
Snaps to that. The wordplay on the word history between history and his story. That's very nice.
You feel
Uh,
me?
that's very nice. Another one that I popped up on was that last line. One of the last lines you said was generational what?
Generational cure.
Generational cure. I love the use of the word generational cure because I feel like a lot within the black community we hear the word generational curse or generational trauma. So for the word generational to be used next to cure instead of trauma, instead of everything that's being passed down being something bad or negative, we talk about the good parts of what's being passed down, what we've stopped, the parts of the generational trauma we have healed, the little parts, the wins that we need to recognize so that we can, take the praise from doing good and continue to do better.
Yeah. I feel like when I wrote that poem, so that's why the event I talked about earlier, it was for an MLK event. And I wanted to give people an opportunity to think internally about, because a lot of the times we go to these events just because we have to, like showing people this is not just a day. It's something that comes so much further before. It's like, the wordplay that I used of his story was to share the fact that, history is his story, and just like that wordplay was just, something that I could kind of go into and just go down that rabbit hole. Like I used, I think I had like one, not a simile, like syllable play between his story, and I brought up Sean Corey, which for those of y'all that don't know,
Yeah.
that's Jay-Z's real name, Sean Corey. And so I kind of like just use things like that, and they just flow together. I feel like one of the beautiful things of poetry is that if you literally just sit with a word, like if I just say history or his story, and I let you sit there with no phone, I take away every device that you have, I promise you anybody will become a poet because you're going to take that word and it's going to come into like 15 different tangents that can all be turned into art. And that's what poetry is.
Art. Yes, I do believe that in the black community and with a lot of black children, a lot of black history starts with Martin Luther King, or that becomes the key figure in where a lot of kids' uh, background knowledge of African American history begins there. While that isn't the beginning, it is usually the first thing or the person you can count on everyone knowing. And the back to the word history and his story being Martin Luther King's story or any black person in America's story. I like that. I definitely like that play on the word, and I definitely agree that if you sit a person down with a word, they ain't gonna have any choice but to make more.
Mm. That was a bar right there. I don't even have anything to
Oh,
say after.
okay.
That was heavy. That was kind of poetic right there, must say.
Well, this is the podcast for the poets, so who better to catch a bar than another poet?
Got to.
Well, thank you for joining me. You can definitely name drop your podcast. Perspectives available on what that would be Spotify and Apple Music.
That's right. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
having me.
perspectives with a K.
Yes, Perspectives with a K. I'm Jay. For those of y'all that would like to follow me on socials, my personal is Floetic J. So like basically poetic, but Floetic instead, and with a K .J. So FLOETIK.J. And then my podcast, Perspectives, the podcast, that's what it is. We call it Perspectives, which is just Perspectives with a K in it. And yes, I am on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. So go ahead and get to that. We got some special things coming up soon. But yeah, this was amazing. I love this content. You have to keep doing it. This is amazing. Poetry, you share it with people. I don't care. You need to listen to poetry. So yes, thank you guys. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jay, and thank you to everyone for listening. Y'all know that my social media is going to be Sweet Shims on Instagram. That's SweetShyms on Instagram. That is the only form of social media that I'll be offering right now as far as anything to do with poetry goes. You can click on my Reels tabs to find a couple spoken word poems and stay tuned for more.